Good evening, everyone. My name is Frank Knufel. I'm a physician at the Breer Memory Program and researcher with the Breer Research Institute. And thank you for coming out this evening. I will start with the usual disclosure. I am part of a research team, and we get about $400,000 a year in research grants. A large part comes from NSERC and CIHR, but we are also funded through the National Research Council as well as AgeWell, National Centers of Excellence. I have gotten consulting fees from a company called Esprit AI, and otherwise, as I mentioned, I'm a physician. I also have a patent in pressure sensor technology, but we won't be talking about that particular device at all today. So the only potential conflict is that I do receive payment in the form of shares from Esprit AI, and I will be mentioning their products, but they did not have any influence in any way over this presentation, and they're only meant to be an example of the technology. And first of all, acknowledgements. I am part of a very large team. My co-lead is Dr. Rafiq Gubran. Bruce Wallace has become a very important player in our SAM3 team. Heidi Sleistrup, Neil Thomas. We do have engineers, we have clinicians, we have industrial designers, we have healthcare management expertise. So we have a great team. We've had literally dozens and dozens of students who have come through our program. We've had an extraordinary team of administrators that have helped us along the way. And then we've hired a lot of research associates who have contributed greatly to all this work. So quick aerial view of Carleton University. So the Engineering Research Center is the Minto Center over there, and this is the new Arise building. So this is where the technology part of our research takes place. This is where we do our first mock-up models of things. And then we come to Breer, and we have the smart apartment on the 4th floor at Breer. We also now have a driving simulator on the 2nd floor. And so the smart apartment we started, and this is a quick history of our research. In 2004, we started by converting an activities of daily living apartment associated with our stroke program and adding some technologies to make it a smart apartment. And so we have sensors in the bed, and you see a computer screen here. We have a smart television here that guides people to remind them to take medication. We have sensors on the fridge I'll talk about later. And we've had pressure sensors on grab bars to see how people are doing getting on and off, for instance, the toilet. We joined AgeWell National Centers of Excellence in 2015. We helped write the proposal for that, and we've been fortunate to play key roles in that. That's the background. And so what are the objectives for today? So I hope that by the end of this talk, you will be able to talk about the potential roles of CogTech, or technology for cognition, that you will be able to have some ideas of some of the things you might be able to do with off-the-shelf smart home systems, and that you'll be able to differentiate between a smart monitoring home and a supportive smart home. And so the outline for today is as follows. We'll talk a little bit about why we got into this business in the first place. I'll give you a little bit of a technology primer. Then we'll talk about some of these potential roles for CogTech. And then I will present just some of the challenges, some of the caveats that we can't forget. I'll talk about some sample technologies that are currently available. And then we'll end. So, and what I've asked is that as I go through the presentation, as you get questions, please put them into the chat. So I will pause after each section, and we'll go through any questions that have accumulated that way. It's sort of I'm answering them in the relevant time in the presentation rather than sort of all at the end. So why cognitive technology? I always like to start clinically. I am a physician at the end of the day. So I'll give you this example, a made-up example of a 78-year-old woman living alone in a bungalow in Orleans. Her daughter lives in Montreal. She noticed some memory problems and a little bit of difficulty managing the finances. So the diagnosis in the clinic was that she was transitioning from mild to moderate neurocognitive decline or mild cognitive impairment to early dementia with some early functional impairment. And of course, she wants to remain living at home. So that provides sort of the context for this, which is, of course, and I don't need to repeat this to anyone, but there is a demographic shift. We are getting older as a population. And more and more, but always have, but even more now, we want to age in place. And the reality, however, is that there is a real health human resource shortage. It's not new, but it has certainly been exacerbated with COVID. So that's the context. So let's talk about dementia a little bit. I know you've had a couple of presentations recently about this, but I'm just going to give you sort of my perspective. So the World Health Organization describes dementia as a syndrome, usually of a chronic and progressive nature. A variety of illnesses that can cause this. They can affect memory, thinking, behavior. And importantly, it affects the performance of activities of daily living, right? And so if we think of other chronic diseases, arthritis would be one, which is chronic joint disease, of course. Congestive heart failure is one. Chronic obstructive lung disease would be one, and chronic renal failure. And just to put it in context, these are conditions that take decades to evolve. There is no cure for any of these. But we do have medication that can help with symptoms. So here are some of the things that cause this. Of course, plaques and tangles, various changes in nuclei, and potentially vascular problems. So any of these can cause brain changes that lead you to go from aging through mild cognitive impairment to dementia. So this is sort of how I graphically represent it. So just to be clear, no one converts from normal aging to mild cognitive impairment overnight. This is a gradual process, and there is a very significant overlap, right, between normal aging and mild cognitive impairment. And similarly, there's a very significant overlap between mild cognitive impairment and dementia. So how do we diagnose it? Well, first, normal aging does include mild changes in memory, mild changes in language ability, as well as executive functioning. In mild cognitive impairment, you have measurable changes. So now we're talking that you're outside of the sort of bell curve, if you like, in memory or language or executive functioning or a combination of them. And then, of course, with dementia, you will have more severe changes in multiple domains. And the difference, of course, is what happens with instrumental activities of daily living. When you're aging normally, you're still managing instrumental activities of daily living from a cognitive point of view. Mild cognitive impairment, it's the same. Even though you have difficulties with memory, there are ways of working around it and you're still able to do things. And of course, in dementia now, you start having difficulties with instrumental activities of daily living, and as the dementia progresses, it can affect basic activities of daily living as well. And so the directionality is everyone starts with normal aging, and then if you have possibly one of the conditions that we showed in the previous slide, you might move to mild cognitive impairment. There are conditions like hypothyroidism or depression that can cause you to have changes in memory. But if the condition is treated, of course, then you can go back to sort of normal aging. However, once you've gone from mild cognitive impairment to a dementia state, it's no longer reversible. So how does it sort of play out from a physiological point of view? The first thing, of course, is that brain cells start getting sick and they ultimately die. This affects brain circuits, right? So bunches of brain cells that are interconnected. This will eventually affect a cognitive domain. So an individual brain cell in the memory part of the brain, of course, won't cause significant damage, but you have to get multiple of those. And eventually your memory is affected. And so finally, these cognitive domains interact and then cause a functional decline. So that's sort of the scaled version of what happens. But in reality, of course, no one comes to me and says, I think my brain cells are dying. They come with symptoms. From there, we put together, with various tools, a diagnosis. Then we want to monitor, possibly treat, depending on the condition. And with monitoring, sometimes we actually change our diagnosis. So that can happen. And eventually there's some kind of functional decline. And we keep monitoring that functional decline, of course, over time as well, and may treat symptoms like you talked about in the last couple of presentations. So in reality, this sort of sequence might look like this. You start at home, everything's fine. As things get more difficult, you might get some services at home. If you need too many hours of services, you may end up in an institution. And so, this is where we would look for potentially technology to help us out. So I'm just going to stop here for a second to give a chance if there's any questions sort of about the dementia side of the house, and I can answer those before I continue.
So there was just one question, Frank, from Amanda, and I think asking about, in your clinical experience, do most folks want to stay at home when they have a diagnosis of dementia?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So, first of all, I have never heard of an older adult, and I've been doing this for 30 years. I have never had an older adult come to me and go, please help me find a place to move to. I want to leave my home, right? So it's almost never happens. Sometimes people say, I want to downsize. Fair enough. I don't need a 2-story house when I'm living by myself. But no one sort of says, please give me a reason to leave my home. So of course, what happens when it's cognitive impairment is that this is exacerbated by the fact that you don't remember the difficulties you had yesterday, last week, last month. So when I say, yeah, but you've been having difficulties with shopping, the person will say, no, I don't. Because they don't remember, because often the dementia, has that memory component. So they don't remember that they have the problem. So they're going to go, no, I do my own shopping, I do my own cooking. Why would I leave my home, right? So almost no one wants to leave their home anyways, but people with cognitive impairment are doubly challenged because they don't even remember the difficulties they have, which if they were able to put it all together, logically, they might actually say, you know what, yeah, maybe staying at home isn't the best idea for me.
So another couple of questions have come in while we've been chatting. I suspect you'll get to answering this one later. It's from Rob saying, is cognitive technology only for intellectual activities that people with dementia struggle with?
So yeah, I include everything that I'm going to talk about today with in cog tech. So you'll see, actually, I'm not going to talk about intentionally. I'm not going to talk about the technology that actually supports cognition or claims to support cognition. I'm certainly happy to answer questions about that towards the end of the presentation. But yeah, for me, cog tech is anything that supports people with cognitive challenges in the context of wanting to age in place.
And then the last question is more about the physiology, I guess, of MCI. And so if a person has MCI related to chemotherapy, I would imagine other examples where the effects of that be compounded with aging? So will it occur earlier in their chronological age compared to others?
That's a great question. So what I would say is, and I'm not an expert in, certainly not an expert in chemotherapy. You guys would be way more experts in that domain. But what I would tell you is that as we age, we lose brain cells. Like literally, we lose 50,000 brain cells a day, all of us, every day. While you listen to me here, we'll probably lose a couple of thousand, each of us. So with age, we're definitely decreasing our cognitive abilities, and like there is that normal accumulation. And the older we get, the more challenging it'll become. So we know that for instance, at 90, somewhere between a third and half of all older adults, 90 and over, will have some kind of cognitive impairment that would be qualified as dementia. So if you have now, let's say you add to that some vascular condition to the brain, yeah, you're going to have more problems. And the older you are, add vascular problems, it's going to be a bigger impact as well. So I'm assuming that then the accumulated cognitive deficits associated with age, right, will add to the effects of the chemotherapy. And then if you've been a drinker or you've been a smoker or other factors come into play, then it would be exacerbated more. And sleep, right? If the person is also not sleeping because of pain, that will exacerbate how it all plays out. So I can't say that with age there's 50% more impact of chemotherapy or anything like that. I don't know the literature that well, but I'm going to go with yes. The more bad things accumulate in your brain, the more likely you're going to have cognitive decline, and eventually it'll be dementia.
Thanks, Frank. So folks, there's been another couple of questions come in that I'm going to save till the end because I want to make sure we can get diving into the topic of hand of our technology.
Okay, thank you, Valerie. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a technology primer now. The way we think of technology in our group is that we start with sort of the human senses, right? We look, we feel, and that kind of thing. So there are sensors that can do this and that can go into the home or into the car. So for instance, a wall-mounted infrared sensor costs maybe $10, has a battery, sends out a little infrared beam every second and looks for that beam to be broken. A bed pressure sensor can be anything from $40 to $1,000, depending on the type of bed pressure sensor. A camera is a sensor, right? Because it collects images. And then GPS in the car is a sensor. So those are the devices. And of course, there are thousands more. I'm just sort of giving you examples of them. They can generate data, right? So the infrared sensor on the wall will simply say, no motion, no motion, no motion, and then something will move and it'll say, motion, right? So that's what you get, motion or no motion. Pressure, depending on the type of sensor, it can be pressure or no pressure, or more refined and expensive sensors can actually give you a scale of the amount of pressure. Cameras obviously create images, and a GPS gives you a location. So when you take that data, what can you get from that? Like, what can you do with that? So if there's motion in a room, you could say, well, there's someone there. It could be a person, could be a dog, but depending on how you aim the sensor, you could sort of limit that to being actually a person in the room. If you do the bed pressure sensor, depending on the quality of it, it could be as simple as, yep, there's someone in bed, or no, there isn't. But if it's a really cool sensor, very sensitive sensor, you can actually get breathing rate while someone is lying in bed. A camera generating images might have swinging arms, like image after image after image, can also detect falling. And the GPS that gives you location, over time, it can say, oh, here's the speed you're moving at. and where are you stopping, right? So you can get different kinds of information from that. So this would be monitoring, right? Because there is someone in the room or there isn't in the room, and that provides us with information. Now, if you want to make it a supportive system, you can actually create an action, okay? So if there's someone in the room and the light is out, you can turn on the light. If someone stops breathing, you could notify the nurse. If someone is falling or has fallen, you can notify the family. If someone is exceeding the speed, you can cut power to the engine, right? So that's sort of answering one of the objectives, which is what's the difference between monitoring and actually supporting. So I'll stop there. It's soon, but I just if there's any technical questions about that, I'll do it now. So then we can dive into sort of real applications.
I think you're good to keep going, Frank.
Perfect. So the potential roles of CogTech, I have a number of them here. I'm going to start with psychosocial well-being. So what do we know about older adults? That as we age, relationships become increasingly more important. So when we're younger, sort of performance is important to us, and you know, and an enjoyment of life. But then as we age, relationships become more important. Older adults still want to continue to contribute, however. And obviously older adults not working, they have more time to take in information. So they're more information junkies. So what happens with cognitive decline is, you know, when it comes to these relationships, is that we may forget the last time we called someone. We may forget the date. And then if we don't know the date, then we might forget whose birthday it is today. And we might forget the news that we heard earlier. So if we think about smartphones as an example of technology for connectedness, they're great. And certainly during COVID, you know, people have used smartphones and iPads to connect with people, and people learned all kinds of new tricks. However, let's just use the smartphone as an example. You know, cognitive decline will affect our ability to use a smartphone, right? So I might need my password. I might forget it. I need to remember which little app does what. Then I might need to click 4 times to get into what I want to do. So the cognitive decline will definitely affect our ability to use a smartphone. Vision can affect our ability to use devices. Hearing can affect that, and then of course arthritis or various neurological conditions will affect our ability to touch, you know, small icons on a small screen. So, you know, if we think about what can technology do just simply to address those things, right? It would be to have ways of avoiding the small screen with all the little buttons, and avoiding having multiple steps, right? So, you know, for instance, if you have a smart home system, you can ask it to remind you of activities in our lives, right? So, you know, in the morning we might have a question, Susan, would you like to hear today's news? Or Bob, would you like to call your daughter? It has been a week since the last call. It is her birthday today, right? So you can see how, you know, a simple smart home device could help with psychosocial well-being and connectedness. I think I'll move on. That was a short section. Let's talk now about something a little heavier. So what is the role of CogTech in the diagnosing and in cognitive monitoring? So currently, when I see patients, there's a first appointment, and depending on what I find, I might see them again in 6 months or in 12 months. That's sort of the normal follow-up right now. However, as you can imagine, what I do on day 1 and day 6 does not necessarily reflect what happened during that entire period of time. So let's take 2 different patients. The first one, let's just say we're measuring a MoCA score, just for the sake of argument. Their score is 25, 24, 25, 23, 25, etc., 27, 26. I think everyone would agree, though, that overall, in this 2-year period, this person's cognition overall was stable. Now, if we take this person, and again, we just for random sake, let's assume that this is, again, MoCA score, we can see that over time, there's a clear decline in this person's cognitive score. Now, if we take 3 points in time, okay, so here's the first point in time. The first visit, I do a memory test. This is the score I get. On the second visit, the memory test score is here. And on the third visit, the memory test score is here. So in my clinic, in my judgment, this person's cognition is declining over time, right? But again, we'd all agree that actually it's not. Similarly, if we take the lower case and I do a test here, and then one here, and then one here, I would say this person is perfectly stable over time, right? And of course, we all know that this person is actually declining. So the idea of getting data in the in-between period, in between appointments, would be highly helpful to my kind of business and probably to many others, right? If we take blood pressure once a year or we take blood pressure once a week, obviously we'll get all kinds of different data. So I'm going to give you an example of a kind of technology that could be done at home at easily at a weekly basis, even twice a week if we wanted to. So this is a simple game online. It's called Cognogram. It is patented. It's a business. It does cost money. But I'll just give you sort of 2 of the screens. So the first one is the playing card is face down. And as soon as the playing card turns over and you see the joker, you click on the yes, right? So it measures speed of processing. And so you do that a number of times, and that's great. And then it measures sort of your average time to response. And then the second thing that happens is that, again, we have playing cards, they're face down, but now the question is the card red, yes or no? So now it turns over, but now you have to think, is it red or not? And then you click either the yes or no. So now we have an accuracy as well as the speed of processing. And there's other components which include, have you seen this card before? So now you'll get the 2 of diamond, the 7 of hearts, whatever. And then the last, couple later, there'll be a 2 of diamonds. Have you seen this one before? So that's more like a delayed memory test. So this is data from patients at our clinic. In a research trial we did, we were looking at people with mild cognitive impairment and comparing them to cognitively normal. And you can see that in the light blue, the mild cognitive impaired consistently scored below people with that were cognitively normal in these various domains. So for sure, you can take home a computer-based test, and this will help us with the cognitive diagnosis. Now, this is work we've done and we're still doing right now. This is an ongoing study, but we wanted to look at a cheaper way to do brain scanning. So obviously a CT scan is expensive, an MRI is very expensive. And if we think about the aging population and all the people that are going to have cognitive decline, there's just no way we can afford to do brain scans on everyone. So what if we could use the electrical waves of the brain to help us determine changes, physical changes in the brain. So if we compare like a multi-$1,000 brain scan, this costs about $50 in the clinic. So here, what happens is you do a particular activity, the brain waves associated with that activity are processed. Engineers love this kind of stuff, but let's just show you the curves. So a cognitively normal person in this N100 part of the wave will have a pattern like this. And this is data that we produced in our lab. Someone with mild cognitive impairment will have a wave that looks more like this. And so the first thing is you see that this valley is actually delayed. So again, more brain cells are dying, more potholes on the the trajectories in the brain. And so not surprisingly, it takes longer to do this cognitive activity. So, of course, you can imagine that you could do this over time, right? And so the whole idea of this kind of thing is that A, it helps with diagnosis, but B, this repeated measure will help us with the evolution from a straight cognitive point of view. So are there any questions at this point?
Yeah, there's been a couple come in. So Robin from the Dementia Society of Ottawa and Renfrew County asked, how important is it to implement cognitive technology to assist a person living with dementia to remain in their home and live well?
So yeah, so we will. So I mean that's a great question, and we will talk more about assisting activities of daily living later, because I don't think this is academic. This is important for diagnosis and for monitoring function. It's not helping the person with the cognitive impairment yet. So hopefully in the next few sections, we'll get more into that, where it actually provides a service. So dementia tech or cognitive tech providing a service, I think, is very valuable. This is valuable to me and to other care providers. But it doesn't really provide a service to the person. Other than that, hopefully I do better practice. I make a better diagnosis.
So another question about this test kind of relates to how broadly it's used. Would it just be with a specialist like yourself, or is there community and long-term care homes?
So yes, so if we talk about the cognogram, the one I showed a little earlier, it is used by a number of clinicians. You can purchase it and you get a license, and then every time you use it, you pay a small fee. So and they generate the results for you and then give you a sort of a probable diagnosis. But so those tests are just computer-based tests, and they are essentially the equivalent of a MOCA or another cognitive test. The advantages of these computerized tests are, one, there is no language issue, right? Because if I do the MOCA in English, but Spanish is your mother tongue, then you're put at a disadvantage. Also, there's no effective education. We know that education is very important for abstraction and that kind of cognitive activity. So this is absolutely education neutral, right? Because it measures speed of processing and recall, and accuracy. So the advantages of this type of technology are clear. The downsides are the cost, and I don't think that anyone has used it longitudinally the way I would love to use it, right? Which is I put the test on someone's iPad, they go home, and every week they do it, and then they come back after 6 months, and I can look at their readout, and I can see that graph to see how their cognition really changed over the 6 months, and not just 6 months ago to today. Is it doing this or this, right? So I don't think anyone is using it that way, because that would break the bank, because you're paying on a sort of use basis, and there's no model for sort of a home use as far as I can tell right now. But that's why we're doing the research and looking more at the longitudinal component. And yeah, I mean, maybe the company will change the way they do it. But again, these are just examples. So the idea, though, that someone can do cognitive testing at home, that exists, right? So, for instance, Baycrest has a testing that anyone can do online right now. You just go online to their Cognicity website and you can do their test, and they will give you sort of a tentative hypothesis of a diagnosis, right? Either cognitively normal for age or impaired. And if it's impaired, they'll say, go see your doctor, because obviously a machine can't do, give the diagnosis. They can only flag concerns, and then you're supposed to go see your physician. So that's... And
you just answered Ken's question about free tests. I'm going to group the next two questions together. So there was a question about whether these tests can help to differentiate between normal cognitive function, mild cognitive impairment, and dementia. And then also, is there any way of differentiating different types of dementia with these tests?
So that's a great question. So the first question is yes, because it gives you, though, a probabilistic model, right? Because we know that there are other factors other than just a test score that come into play. So it goes, if you score 0 on 30, then there's a really high chance that you've got some cognitive issues, right? So from a diagnostic point of view, they will say, normal for age, mildly impaired, moderately impaired, and then for those, they'll say, please see your doctor. As far as diagnosing different types of dementia, I have not seen that technology, and I would say that it would be a very risky business to get into, because it would become a medical device, right? If the result is simply giving you a score compared to normals of your age, that gives you advice, but it doesn't give you a diagnosis. If we said you have Lewy body disease and it was wrong, it would be like a huge liability for companies. So now I don't know if anyone's doing it on a research basis, trying to to do that kind of work. So I would not get into that business myself, right? What I do want to know, though, is over time, how is my person's thinking changing? I'd like to hold the diagnosis. Is it Lewy body? Is it Alzheimer's type? Is it Parkinson's with dementia? I'm happy to hold that diagnosis, but what I really want to know is, how is that changing over time? And especially if I only see once a year, what's happened in between, right? So I don't know of technology that tries to diagnose, and I don't think anyone would take on that liability right now.
Thanks, Frank.
Cool. Thanks. So we've talked about psychosocial well-being, we've talked about diagnosis and cognitive monitoring. So let's talk about that next section, which is sort of that activities of daily living. So this is old technology. This is from actually a project that we did in 2012. And you can tell it's old because there's a wire running on the side of the fridge here. Now, of course, everything is wireless. And this box here is, we built it ourselves, like literally put it together in the lab with wires and everything coming out. So this is an old model, but it was our first attempt at a smart fridge project. So what we actually wanted to do was to see, can we develop patterns of fridge use? The hypothesis was that if I open the fridge a lot, I'm getting out a variety of different types of food, and that's good. And if I'm having some kind of schedule in my life that, then that's a good thing too. So we thought, well, let's monitor just fridge opening and closing. And so we did that, and we did a trial in a seniors apartment building in Ottawa, and we simply got volunteers. And the reason there's a speaker on the top is that we sold the device to them as being a good aid in case you forget to close the fridge door. So if you left the fridge door open for a minute, there'd be a voice saying the fridge door is open. And if it's another minute later, the fridge door is still open, right? So that's how we sold the device to them. But behind the scenes, we were really looking at when are they opening the fridge. So here's the frequency, so the number of times the fridge door was opened against time, from midnight to midnight. And so you can see clearly there's sort of 3 blocks when when the fridge was open, corresponding to this person's breakfast, lunch, and dinner time. And you can see there's sort of 2 other periods where the fridge was open, little peaks. So sort of, the afternoon snack and maybe the evening snack or the evening drink before going to bed. So the idea here was, if this is my pattern, and over 2-3 months, I start missing this peak, and I have some here, I have some here, I have some here, but I'm missing my noon peak. What does that represent? It represents some kind of change in my functional ability. And if we go back to our sort of hierarchy, is it because there's challenges with my cognitive domain? And is that because there are circuits that are breaking down? And is that because I have more cellular damage, right? So this would be sort of where the system would learn my pattern. And then when that pattern is broken, we would know that there's something going on. So let's look at other types of sensors. So here is a temperature humidity sensor. So this is this year. So you can see here's your loonie, and here's the size of the sensor. And this particular sensor measures both temperature and humidity. And this is data from Esprit. And this is my conflict of interest. This is the company I've done work for, but they've kindly provided data, and so I think it's worth showing. So this was a sensor above the stove, and you can see that most of this period the temperature is here, but sort of at 11:15-ish the temperature rose sharply, and then it went back down. So clearly there was stove activity here. And you can, of course, make some kind of correlation with the stove being on, some kind of meal or some kind of drink is being heated. Again, this goes to complexity of the type of meal that you might be making. Microwaving something is one thing, wouldn't require a stove. And so here's one in a bathroom. And so you can imagine that if we look at our list of sensors, it's unlikely that anyone will ever want a camera in the bathroom for obvious reasons. But a small loonie size temperature humidity sensor would be considered quite unobtrusive, and it might provide us some of that same information. So again, here, the humidity in the room beginning of end is sort of a low level humidity, and then gradually the humidity goes up and then it goes down again. So this is from sort of 156 to 234. That would be a half-hour long shower. Probably not, maybe more likely to be a bath. So, we can make some assumptions about this person having had a bath. And again, if we think about people with cognitive impairment, one of the things that happens, unfortunately, is that they forget to perform hygiene. So having a weekly bath is really important. So if we had a sensor, we'd be able to say, with a high degree of reliability that a bath was had. So this is busy. I apologize for that, but I wanted to show you that this is a system that currently exists for research purposes. Colleagues in Oregon have put together this set of sensors, and this system is actually running in some 400 homes around North America, in France, and in Asia. And it's a package, which if you take one sensor, you have a good idea of what the person might be doing. Of course, if you put together multiple sensors, you can get a lot more information. So here's a med tracker. So each of these compartments has a little door latch sensor in it. So when this gets opened, a little message gets sent to the system through the internet to a secure server that says, you know, the Wednesday compartment was opened on Wednesday at 9 a.m. or whatever. There's a smart scale that if you weigh yourself, the data will go to the server. There is an activity monitor. There are door sensors. There are motion sensors. There are bed sensors. There's a car sensor. There are computer monitoring activity sensors. So there's a small patch that's put onto your computer device, and it monitors how often you're using your computer. And so all of this information gets collected, goes to the internet, and provides data about the person that has this group of sensors in them. And you can imagine that you might be, when you're aging normally, you might be active on the computer, you might be doing FaceTime, you might be searching for things on Google, you might be even doing online banking. And so you might spend a couple of hours a day on your computer. But as your cognition declines, it's harder, and you forget your passwords for your finances, and that's a little harder. So you go to the bank and you have the teller do your transactions for you. You might have more difficulty doing searches, so you do less of that. And so over time, what you do on the computer, but also how much time you spend on the computer will change. If there's no cognitive decline, this should stay stable. If there is cognitive decline, of course, this would decrease over time. Here, there are motion sensors put in a line. So as you walk down the hall, this one will get fired, then this one, then this one, then this one. And it gives an idea of how fast you're walking. So let's take someone with Parkinson's disease. If their Parkinson's is less well controlled, it would take longer to get down this hall. So again, all these sensors, right, would have different roles, but together would be able to provide a pretty good idea about how the person that's living in this home is functioning. So I think I'll stop here because activities of daily living is important. Now, we focused on monitoring so far, so we will do a little bit more action in the next section, but are there questions, Valerie?
So there was a comment about, and I think you just reflected that in your last comment, about be really interesting for a family caregiver to have all that integrated into one app. Thinking about your patient, your client in Montreal and the family in Ottawa. And then Jill asked, can people set this up so that their family would know if there was a problem, even potentially an acute illness could be detected? I was thinking about weight and heart failure.
Right.
Right.
So yeah, so I mean, so we'll get to the current technology that's out there, but the short answer is yes, in theory. And this goes back to the caveats, right? Because this is not trivial. This is complex stuff. So this particular set of sensors, you need to be enrolled in a research study to be able to access this. Because of it's very expensive. It's very complex. The data goes to Oregon. They process it, and it's extremely complex. But we do have a number of homes in Ottawa right now that are running these systems. So everything I'm showing you is real and is happening. Yeah. So the idea is that these are examples of things that can be done. And you're absolutely right. So if someone, and again, with people with cognitive impairment, will they remember? But ideally, will someone with congestive heart failure weigh themselves every day? That would be, of course, ideal. Now, just because we have looked at this issue as part of our work over the last number of years, if people can't remember to get on the scale, how else can we take their weight? Well, we could build the scale into somewhere where they go regularly every day and we just take it passively. What about the bed? Everyone goes to bed at one point in the day. So what if we could measure a person's weight from the bed? And we've actually been doing work on that, looking at fluid overload in people while they're in bed. So we were actually, just as a side note, we were able to actually monitor someone drink water. We see the weight appear in their stomach. Then we see it just sort of diffuse throughout the body. Then we see it reaccumulate in the bladder. And then they got up and went to the bathroom and they lay back down and it was gone. Like literally, that's how amazing the technology is, that we can actually track fluid movement throughout the body. Now, these are multi-$1,000 sensors, of course, but just as a case in point. So yes, so this is real. This is the work on this is happening, and a number of research sites have started to try to use these in a more generalized way. But yeah, that's exactly the idea. And as we get to the next sections, hopefully I'll show you some of that and some of the systems you can get today to do some of this.
So Stephanie Langlois asked, are there issues with consent? So I'm assuming if people consenting to this monitoring, I'm assuming if this is in the context of a research study, this has all been explained to them and they've given consent for participation, and a substitute decision maker would have done so for somebody who doesn't have the.
Absolutely. So yeah, and this is great. These comments are anticipating always what's coming up, so that's great. That'll be in the caveats. I'll talk about ethics, right? Because I think ethics is a very, very significant issue, and remote monitoring has the potential, for all kinds of abuse, of course. But for sure, if you're in a research trial, the Research Ethics Board has to approve it. So there's very clear protection about data and privacy and that kind of thing. So all of these research trials for sure have consent. Consent in real life now becomes another issue. And I'll just throw out there, how many people have a cell phone, a smartphone? And how many people downloaded the most recent iOS update, 15.2 whatever it was? I'm just making it up. And how many of you read the entire contract before you said yes? So you consented, right? Did you read it all? Do you really know what this 15.2.6 or whatever it is doing? Does, if it says on page 42 at the bottom that they will monitor where you're going, did you consent to that? Well, it's written there, but so consent is a very complex problem. But I think technology certainly compounds it. And like I said, I will talk about this a little bit more in the caveats part of the presentation, but no, I'm glad that people are great audience. You're touching all the right notes.
Thanks, Frank.
All right. So here I'm going to talk about some more advanced neurocognitive decline, and I'm going to try and give an example of a first system that we were a part of, that we helped create, where we wanted to not monitor, but actually provide an action. So this was about 5 years ago now, that, my wife actually said to me, okay, you've been doing this for 10 years, you've been doing all this research and whatever. And so, but at the end of the day, you're a physician, right? So So the question is, who have you helped with this technology? And I sort of went, wow, okay, well, we published 75 papers, and there's 10 people got PhDs and 15 got masters and degrees, and I'm changing the world because all these people are going to go out there and do really cool things. And she goes, well, that wasn't my question. I said, really, like today, who has a system like this in the home where you contributed to it? So that was a tough question. So we went and talked actually to the Dementia Society, and we had one of the board members come to talk to us, and we said, look, we got access to all kinds of sensors. It's sort of like eyes and ears in the home, and so like what keeps you up at night, literally, what keeps you up at night? And so this particular person said, look, I live with my husband who has dementia. It's moderately advanced. We sleep in the same bed, and at night he gets up, goes to the bathroom, and usually he comes back to bed. But sometimes now, even during the day, he doesn't recognize all the rooms in the house. And I worry that at night, he may not find his way back to bed. And in the middle of January, if he walks out the front door, that can have tragic consequences. So now, every time the bed moves, I'm wide awake because I'm waiting for him to come back to bed. And if he doesn't come, I get up, I look for him in the house, and then I bring him back to bed. So, is there technology for that? And well, there's no technology designed to do that, but we sort of said, well, that's pretty straightforward, right? The sensors are there, and we just have to turn the purpose of the technology around a little bit, and for sure we can come up with something. So, so the goals were, can we help the person living with dementia directly find their way back to bed? And at the same time, can we improve the quality of sleep and reduce the stress of the caregiver? And so we set out to study 20 homes with the dyad of person living with dementia and a caregiver. So what did we do? We literally went to Home Depot and bought stuff off the shelf, right? So we had some smart light bulbs, smart plugs, motion sensors, and these, you can see this was a couple, 5 years ago. So these are older looking sensors, but yeah, they worked. Door sensors right here. This is a magnet, that's a magnetic switch. And this is the hub. And so this was a Samsung hub, and these were Samsung sensors. And so we went into people's homes and attached them to doors, put a pressure sensitive mat. So it's black on black here a little bit, but it's a pressure sensitive mat that slips under the mattress of the bed. And by the way, just so you know, we used a PET sensor. So I don't know how many of you have one of these at home, but it's a sensor that you put under the doormat on the front door or the back door. And your pet, after having done their business, will go and sit on there and wait for you. The sensor will pick up the pet's presence and will ring a little bell, and then you'll go and open the door, and your pet can come in. So what we said, well, let's use it for humans. And we said, let's put it under the mattress. So it's an on-off switch under the mattress. And we had bought Sonos smart speakers. So a Sonos speaker, I have some at home. I'm sure some of you do as well. And then we had iPads that we used to program the system. So Samsung allows you to set some simple rules. And of course, it was designed as an alarm for the home. So if you're on vacation and there's a motion detected in your house, it would send you a notification on the iPad and would say, hey, you might want to check in, call the neighbor to check if there's someone in the house or whatever. So that's how this thing was set up, but we set it up slightly differently. So here's what we did, and this is in partnership with the Champlain Lynn and funded by CABI. So the person living with dementia gets out of bed, so the pressure comes off the bed, so it's now the cat has, or the dog has left the pressure sensor. And what happens, a number of lights go on in the hall to light up the path to the bathroom, because 9 times out of 10, let's face it, we wake up in the middle of the night, that's where we need to go. If we go follow the light path back to bed, we lie down, the sensor goes up, person's in bed, and everything is shut down. So all the lights are turned off and everything continues. So you can see the person gets up out of bed, ends up in bed. So now we don't need to disturb the caregiver, right? So the person lying beside them wouldn't be disturbed. The lights are in the hall. Typically, we don't put them in the bedroom. So now let's say that the person living with dementia has gone to the bathroom but gets distracted and ends up going to the kitchen. There is a motion sensor in the kitchen, and when it senses motion, it activates the Sonos speaker, which says, honey, it's the middle of the night, come on back to bed. And we typically use the voice of the caregiver, right? So in this case, it might be his wife. But we've also used children, depending on the circumstances. But we try to use a familiar voice. So now you've had light, a visual cue to help you find your way back to bed. If that didn't help, now you have an auditory cue to get you back to bed. Now let's say that you do go to the front door, and then, of course, the full-on alarm goes. And we can either send a text message, we can flash the lights in the bedroom. Of course, again, this is customizable and for the person that's the caregiver. So the person, the caregiver, can sleep through all of this, right? Only when they need to be woken, when they're heading to the front door, do they want to be woken, and they will be woken. So here is data coming out of this kind of system. So this is one night, August 31st, in a particular participant. And you can see where they go to bed and where they get up. And so they went to bed sort of just after 9-ish in the evening, and they got up sort of 7:45-ish in the morning. So the dark blue here is all the time that they're in bed. And you can see that they got up out of bed 3 times. And if we look at here, this gives you which room they were in. And in this case, the person living with dementia had their own bathroom, particular bathroom that they use. And you can see that that is where they went all 3 times. And you can see how long they went, right? And it gives you an idea. And in this case, they didn't go into the living room or into the kitchen or any of the other rooms. If you're wondering why here the person's in bed and yet there seems to be some kind of action in the family room, yes, the wife in this case goes to bed a couple of hours later. This is sort of her private time. So yeah, so she was active in the family room. Then she went she went to the living room once, maybe turned off the lights, and then they were both in bed after that. So again, you can see patterns, and if you take a person's activity over a number of weeks, this is what you can do if you plot it in a circular plot. So this is the first night, the second night, the third night, well, day and night, fourth, etc. So it's concentric rings. And so you see now already you're starting to see some patterns, right? So you can see that sort of the typical time for the person living with dementia to go to bed is sort of that 9-ish period. And you can see that the care partner sort of is more likely to go to bed sort of here in that 10, 11-ish kind of period. And you can see the time they get up. And you can see that usually by 1 a.m., there's been one bed exit. So these red lines are going to the bathroom, right? So you can see the periods. And so you sort of get some pattern on a regular basis. Now, for the caregiver, we actually did an anxiety scale. And when we started the trial, so this was a 12-week trial, we started in each home. When we started the trial, people were moderately stressed about what was happening at night and where the loved one was going. And at the end of the trial, they were pretty much on average, they were back down into sort of lower levels of stress. So we really, we succeeded in cueing the person living with dementia. So now the sensors are not just sort of collecting information. So now here we really converted that information into helping both the person living with dementia and the caregiver. So we can stop there sort of on some of the research we've done, and sort of hopefully I've sort of given a foretaste of the kinds of things that a supportive smart home does and not just a monitoring smart home does.
So Frank, one of the questions was about how to use the knowledge you've just shared. In my understanding, this was kind of in the context of a research project, and later on you're going to share what some of the readily available technology is out there.
So I mean, so as you probably got a feeling of, right, this is really complex. I mean, when we started, we sort of thought, should be pretty easy. Like we put this thing on the fridge and then we see door openings and we'll be able to say if the person is eating well. But of course, that sense sort of does nothing about medication taking. It does nothing on shopping. It does nothing on computer use. So then we sort of said, well, okay, so we'll need a couple more sensors. And then of course, behavior is not just as mechanistic as that. I've shown examples of pretty regular routines. And so like the fridge, I obviously chose someone who, opens the fridge pretty much on a regular basis. But we do know that people with more cognitive impairment are, their sense of time is affected as the temporal lobe gets affected more and more. And so their patterns start breaking down. So they don't get those nice peaks anymore. So the idea is to, again, is to monitor, because at the end of the day, we need to know, are they still safe? If they're living alone in particular, are they still taking a bath? Are they still eating? Are they still making meals that are, more than just, toast and jam? So it's that monitoring piece and the cueing piece, which is if they didn't take their pill by a certain time, can we cue them and remind them until they finally do take their pills? So yeah, this is a work in progress. This is not finished, not in a long shot. The next section I'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges, and it's only a very small. I just want people to get a little idea of the challenges, but we can talk about more of them. I mean, people have already asked some of the sort of ethical questions, but yeah, we still have a ways to go. Like this, there is no such thing as go to Best Buy, buy this thing, stick it in the home, and it solves all of your concerns. There's no such thing. But progress is being made in individual domains. And so now we need to figure out, okay, how do we put it together into some useful package?
And to clarify, because you said you did go to Home Depot, you can't go to Home Depot and just set these things up.
You can. So literally, if someone wants to.
Is there a step-by-step guide?
No. So there is that, right? So the reality is, yes, you can go to Home Depot and buy all these pieces. But yeah, I mean, obviously our team has a lot of expertise, and we can, put together things and program in the cloud with, I don't do that, my people do that, but people that are smarter than I. So it's definitely not trivial. So the reality is, can this be done today? Yes. Is it easy? No. Is this a business opportunity? Yes, right? And so this is where you sort of have to build the momentum and build the team. And we'll get to that in a subsequent section where I will actually go, this you can get today, and this is what it does. So I will get there. But yeah, I mean, this is not trivial, and we're not ready to do this large scale yet. Like we're starting incrementally. I mean, not we as in my team, but we as a society. I think we're incrementally doing things. But yeah, we still have a ways to go. But people that have mildly good programming skills could do some of these things today, yes.
Thanks, Frank. Oh, Ed just asked, how many years away is it for the average caregiver to be able to get all this from Home Depot, if you had to guess?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Look, I'm going to go on a limb and say that in 5 years' time, we will be in a place where there are a significant number of safety issues for, be it people with cognitive issues, be it people with mobility issues, whatever the issues are. There will be a number of viable and working systems that can be purchased. I do think that will be in the next 5 years. I'll show you, there are things you can get now and you can do now. And like I said, it just requires a little bit of creativity to do things. So, and I'll talk about that with some of the products that are available. So.
You're good to go. Carry on.
All right. So let's talk about those caveats. And this is really right. So far, I've painted this beautiful picture of, the future is coming, and that'll be great when the future gets here. But there are a lot of things that are not done. So the first thing is, sensors generate data. So that's their purpose in life. So let's say the sensor that detects motion, essentially, it says, no motion, no motion, no motion, no motion, until someone walks into the room, then there's motion, and then there's motion, and there's motion, and there's motion, then the person leaves the room, then there's no motion, no motion, no motion. So, there'll be a line of information, let's say, every minute, for sake of argument. So you'll get, imagine an Excel spreadsheet, right? The first line says no motion, a minute later it says no motion, a minute later it says no motion. And so you're going to fill your spreadsheet over time. Once a minute, you will get one piece of information. Great. Now let's imagine a pressure sensor. Let's say this pressure sensor is in the bed, and we're using it to detect breathing. This pressure sensor will need to have multiple points that will measure the pressure, because we need to see chest movement. And it needs to be sensitive. So it needs to give me a number of the pressure in that spot. So now, and breathing is, pretty fast. And we need to be able to distinguish that from like turning in bed and whatever. So now we're going to sample this pressure sensor 10 times a second. And there's going to be 18 of these sensors on the bed, so that we cover a good area, so that we're sure we can capture breathing. Now, right, we're talking about 10 times a second, 18 sensors are going to give us a number. So now every second, we're going to have 180 pieces of information. And now you can imagine, over a day, we're going to have quite a bit more data. Now let's take the extreme, a video camera. A video camera has an image that has pixels, and there are thousands of points, right? And they run 30 frames a second, right? So or a minute, sorry, and no, a second. So you can imagine now we're generating literally hundreds of thousands of data points per second. Now, if you have a house that has cameras, pressure sensors, door sensors, window sensors, temperature sensors, humidity sensors, you can imagine this is going to generate a lot of data. This data has to go somewhere to be interpreted. So it will go to a hub, typically right now. That hub will then send the data to the cloud. From the cloud, it needs to go somewhere to be stored and to be processed. So we need transmission, we need computer databases, and then we need computers that can analyze this. So we need algorithms that will do the analysis for us. So we do this for one house at a time. It takes a lot of work, years of research. And we're able to start extracting breathing rhythms 2 years later, right? That's how long it takes to figure out how to do this. So there are challenges with the pipes, right? How big a pipe do you need to throw in information from a house with all of these sensors? Now, what if there are 10 houses on the street that have these sensors? What if there's 10,000 of these houses in Ottawa with these sensors, right? You're generating an incredible amount of data. And so how do you manage this? So honestly, the infrastructure isn't necessarily there to do this right now. So luckily, that's not going to happen. We're not going to have 10,000 homes tomorrow with 50 sensors each. Whoops, am I still getting heard? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
I've got a computer thing happening. Of course there is. I apologize. I'm just gonna have to.
It's funny, it happens on the slides on caveats for technical issues.
You can't, and especially a technology talk, right? If you can't have one without some kind of technology hiccup. Okay, I just have to make sure I still am connected to the internet and I don't lose my connection. Okay, good. I think we're back. Fantastic. So we generate lots of data and it needs to go through pipes. It needs to go to computers, databases that can manage this data. So we know that Amazon has huge databases, multiple sites, huge warehouses just to manage the data coming from our homes right now. If all older adults start having smart homes, they're going to generate huge amounts of data. So we're not ready, but we're working on it. So we talked about the infrastructure, and of course, all of this costs money, right? And at the end of the day, who's going to pay? It's going to be the user. So how do you keep the cost reasonable? I talked about the computers and the algorithms, and then security is really important, right? If we're going to be transmitting video data from someone's, even of the hall, right? If you like to walk around your home naked, I mean, that's not something you necessarily want to share with the Wild West. So the system has to be secure. And again, the smart homes currently running on Amazon and Google Home seem to be doing that relatively securely, but we do know that our voices are, what we're saying is being picked up by the system. So none of these are trivial. All of these are very significant and are things that we need to think about. This is just the technical stuff, right? So let's talk about the ethical things. So when we talk about the cost of this technology, who can afford it? Right now, it's only going to be people that have disposable income that are going to be able to afford this, to go to to Home Depot and buy a $1,000 system, right? That's a real limitation. So is that ethical? Is that what we want? That only older adults that are financially secure, that they're the only ones that get this kind of technology? Then we have the whole issue of split, between urban, rural, First Nations and other subcategorizations. But just as an example, who has high-speed internet? Who has the infrastructure that there is, a high-speed cable going to every home? Then there's the ability to use, right? Who has been exposed to the smartphone? Who can program an Amazon device using their smartphone? So who has that ability to use? So these are all really serious ethical issues we need to think about as a society, right? Again, it's lovely that some of my patients can afford to do some of this right now, but is that the kind of Canada, the kind of society we want? And then if it isn't, then how do we make it fair? How do we get high-speed internet to every home in Canada, right? And who's going to pay for that? The next issue is the whole question of design of technology. And it's not trivial, right? The people that are designing the smartphones, who are they? They're between 25 and 38 years old. And they think like 25 to 38-year-olds, and they design things for 25 to 38-year-olds, right? So they design things for what they know. So the user interface is great if you're 25 to 38. I'm not saying 60-year-olds can't use a smartphone. Of course they can. But, who's thinking about the person with arthritis that also has mild Parkinson's disease? Who thinks that, the little folder with 10 apps in it, that was designed for someone with arthritis and Parkinson's disease? And the user interface, so that whole user interface, right? How do I get to what I want to do? People have not been thinking about older adults when they designed this. They have not been thinking about older adults with cognitive impairments when they designed it. And the next issue, which is the one we don't really think about so much, is how does AI work? So this artificial intelligence that's changing our lives and making everything so wonderful, is based on algorithms, and the algorithms are based on data, and the data comes from people using the technology, right? So, as an example, there are databases of faces where they have tens of thousands of images of faces. And so the idea is to learn to recognize who's happy, who's sad, all kinds of variables that you might want to get from a face. This is great, right? So these databases are being used to develop algorithms. How many people do you think in a 35,000 person database, how many people do you think are over 70 in that database? Right? A handful. So how can we design technology that's going to be useful for older adults if it's based on images of faces that are 25 to 45, right? And then what about all kinds of other groups, right? So people with different skin colors, people with different life habits or life patterns, right? So if you design a database on what you define as normal, right, you are pushing the data in a particular direction. So there is a huge issue right now with databases and who's included in the databases and how that drives how we understand data. And all of the artificial intelligence is based on big databases, right? So, and anyway, so I'm going to leave it at that for now, but this is a huge issue right now, especially when it comes to older adults, that a lot of the technology we're designing won't work for them because they're not in the data, right? So I'm sure this has generated a couple of discussion points. So,
so one of the comments, and I hope I'm interpreting it correctly, is around liability. So as a healthcare provider, if I gather data, am I required to do something about it? Because as you say, that's a lot of data. And, you know, would I be responsible if something went wrong and I didn't respond to something that, or missed something in all that data?
Yeah, fantastic point. Exactly right, right? So who owns the data, right? Is it the sensor company? They're the ones generating it, right? Is it the transmission company? Is it TELUS? They're transmitting the data. Well, they're responsible when they're moving it from the home to the database, but the database people, do they own the data? Is it the people that write the algorithms, right? Are they responsible? You know, so this is a huge problem. We don't know who owns the data, right? And in fact, Apple is, you know, they love us when we use our phones because they're generating incredible amounts of data on what we're doing and they're selling it for all kinds of things. So that question is a brilliant question, right? Who owns the data? If something goes wrong, who's responsible, right? So if that sensor on the wall stops working and the person falls and no one finds out because that sensor is not working, who's responsible? Is it the sensor producer? Is it TELUS because they transmitted the data and they didn't notify that the data stopped transmitting? Is it the database people? Is it the installer, right? There are so many people along the line that have had to contribute to do this, right? So yeah, who owns the data? Who's responsible for the data? So that's an excellent, excellent question. And there's no answer to that, but that is a public policy issue that needs to be addressed, right? So I'm just going to do a little sidebar because this is a great question for this. And that is that there is, in legal terms, there is a difference between a medical device and a wellness device. And let me give a trivial example of that. So if you go to the pharmacy and buy a blood pressure cuff, that is a medical device. It is calibrated to the nearest 2 millimeters of mercury. To be precise, it's been tested. It's been proven against the gold standard. It's a medical device. It does one thing and it does it really, really well. And otherwise you can't sell it without the CSA approval or whatever. Now, if you have an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, it'll give you a reading of something that approximates your blood pressure. It is a wellness device. If you read the notification with, the consent with your device, you will know that that is not guaranteed to be within 10 millimeters of mercury. And it is meant as a relative measure so that you can say, oh, my blood pressure is going up or it's not going up, and that's why I'm getting a headache or whatever. It's a wellness device. So they do not claim to give you an accurate reading or a diagnosis, if you like, right? So that is a huge issue because a lot of people buy these devices thinking that they're medical devices, but they're not, right? So I'll give you another example. There are at least 8 different manufacturers, major manufacturers of bed sensors. We've had all of them, and we've had all of them in the same person's bed. This was a home project. The person took them home and sometimes ran 2 or 3 at the same time. And they all, being wellness devices, said that they could approximate the kind of sleep you're having during the night. When we looked at the data, there was no 2 out of 3 devices that agreed. Even time out of bed, they couldn't agree on, okay? This is how imprecise these devices are. But if you read the fine print, they'll claim that this is a wellness device. It's not meant to be diagnostic of anything. So, but I know a lot of people, including my own wife, right, who wear these and look at them religiously and say like, oh my gosh, I had a horrible night last night. I go, well, do you feel like you had a horrible night last night? You, oh yeah, I feel like I had a horrible night. But look, my watch tells me that too. And I'm going, so, you know, we just have to be really careful. These wellness devices are very different. So the liability question, which opened this parenthesis, is that as long as you claim to be only doing a pattern or something that you yourself can use to decide if you want to do something else with it later, these are wellness devices, and they're not meant to be, you know, diagnostic. So great question, but the device makers know not to pretend that they're making diagnoses and not to claim precision beyond relative, right? So your breathing rate is relatively higher than yesterday. We're not going to diagnose sleep apnea though, right? Great question. And it goes back to this whole caveat, which is, right, who owns the data? What happens when there is no data? And right, so, you know, and many of you know, if you don't charge a Fitbit and it's your best day of exercise, too bad, there's no record of it. There will never be a record of it, right? So, yeah.
Thanks, Frank.
Okay, good. So that brings us to what is available today. So in its simplest form, right, we've all seen some of these. This is the one that's available in Ottawa, the red dot system, but, you know, any kind of helpline or Philips help, you know, alarm or whatever. These are relatively simple systems, and this was the most simple version of it, which is, I need help, I push the button. You know, if I fall, I'm lying on the floor and I can't reach my phone, I press this button and the telephone speaks to me and I can say, yes, I need help, please send someone, whatever. These are available. There's lots of them. They do all kinds of things. Here again, there are ones that claim to do fall detection. I will say that I have not found one that I find reliable enough to suggest to my patients to use. If you want to have, you know, catch some falls and have some false positives and it doesn't bother you and you feel more secure having it, sure, go ahead and buy it. But yeah, so this is sort of the most simple thing. Jumping right ahead into more complex things, you know, right now, you can get a medication reminder app on your phone. And, you know, you program in, you know, take this pill at 8 o'clock in the morning, take this pill at 10 o'clock in the morning, whatever, and your phone will reliably let you know it's time to do that. And then you can press, you know, I've done it, or I'm going to do it later, remind me in 10 minutes, sort of like you know, like any alarm, a morning alarm. Right now, you can get your Fitness Pal on your phone that says how many calories you burn and all those things. So you know all this, but just to say, right, this is remote monitoring of activities. And hypothetically, this could be used with older adults. We know these are a typical fitness device and it measures all kinds of things. And again, it claims to measure sleep quality, and we know that that's not reliable, but it can have a telephone connection, right? It might have a GPS built in, so locating devices, so exercise devices. Smart TVs, right? You can have email, internet, Netflix, Skype. I have seen devices that are connected to the television that can provide a medication reminder. So if you're not wearing your watch and it's trying to tell you, hey, you're supposed to be taking your pill, you can actually get the message to appear on your TV screen while you're watching a movie. There you can get program in reminders to take vital signs as well, or in the case of our congestive heart failure person, reminder to take a weight. Now we're into smart lights. This is the Philips package, but there are other providers, but Philips is pretty darn good. So, you can do fun things like colors and brightness, but you can do now activation by movement. So that idea of, the light going on when I'm walking to the bathroom, that's available now. There's the sunlight wake up, which is nice. The sun's, the sun starts rising. If you want to wake up at 4:30, like in my house, I have it set up so at 4:30, the light starts coming on in the office and it shines sort of towards the bedroom. Doesn't disturb my wife, but then when I wake up, I go, oh, look, it's bright, and I can get my day going. It can be linked to music, of course, and relaxation modes. So the smart light is there, and it's a matter of figuring out how to use it. The smart fridge is there, way smarter than the fridge we made in 2014. Here's one where you can actually see what's inside. So there's actually a camera inside. You can program in expiration dates, right? So if the milk is good for 5 days, you can put that in, and it will remind you that the milk is coming due. You can do recipe searches. You can order food from the fridge, and so on. So the smart fridge is here. How useful is it for a person with cognitive impairment? I'm not making comments on any of these, but I'm just saying here are some devices that exist. So here's a smart mattress. So instead of a wearable device or a sensor you put under the mattress, here's one that's built right into the mattress. So you can preheat the bed before you go to bed. It can give you a sleep report and some stages. And again, with the caveat that this is not a medical device. It is more a wellness device. And it can have the smart weight, which is kind of cool. It will use the information about your sleep stage, so it will never wake you in the middle of your REM sleep. So if you're busy dreaming and it's 6:45 and that's when you're getting up, it will delay it so that it'll wait till 20 after, so that you don't wake up with that like in the middle of your dream kind of heavy duty wake that happens sometimes, right? So it will adjust your wake time to your sleep state. Again, as good as it is. So here, I apologize, an older picture of the Amazon system, and it's kind of funny. I thought, don't forget to call her name, because of course she doesn't do anything if you don't speak to her first. But yeah, you can get, you can ask her 10 times what the date is today. She'll never get tired, right? Whereas your daughter, if you call her 10 times and go, what's the date today, honey? She will get tired of it. So useful. Temperature, inside, outside, right? News, music, a book. And this is not trivial, right? Having someone read to you is not, it's a good social activity. You can call someone, right? If you can't use your smartphone because the buttons are too small and you can't type the right numbers, you can say, hey, call my daughter, right? And that works. It can answer questions. There are, medication reminders. They can all be built in, right? So you can ask 10 times, what's the weather going to be today? And it'll be repeated, no problem. And it's interesting, I've had families work around the challenge with the initiation part. So what they did is they put in a smart camera into the home, monitored on the phone, and when the person sat down in their favorite chair in the living room, that would trigger the camera to go on, and this camera had a speaker on it, and the family would then say through the speaker, hey, Google, call Suzanne. Then the Google would call Suzanne and they would have their connection. So even when the person forgets how to initiate the system, there are ways to bypass it. Again, a little bit of creativity, but there are ways to work around it. But really, I think, the biggest game changer in the last couple of years has been this, right? The Amazon, the Google, it hopefully soon, and this is why I say I think in 5 years' time there will be a silver Alexa or a silver Google or something like that that will be customizable for older adults. I'm hoping. Here's something that exists right now that you can actually go and purchase off the shelf. So Best Buy has a system called Assured Living. And I would say it is probably the best off-the-shelf system that I know of right now. It has a limited number of sensors, but it's connected to artificial intelligence. So you put the system in place, and for the first 2 weeks, it doesn't do anything. It just monitors and gets to know the pattern of activity of the person living there. After that, it continues to monitor, but now anytime there's a deviation from that original 2-week pattern, a notification will be generated. That notification can go to someone's smartphone. So the question earlier, right? If I want to see how my parents are doing, this is actually an off-the-shelf system that can be purchased today. It has two components. You purchase the hardware, and then you lease on a sort of on a monthly basis the service that comes with it. I would say it's quite good. I've been quite impressed with the kind of data that comes out of it. And there might be questions later that I can ask, about some of the pros and cons. But I mean, it is I would say the best system that you could get right now. And in BC, they actually are partnering with Bayshore, a home care provider, to see if the information goes to a home care provider, like can you improve that communication and data use. And I've already talked about this, the CART system. This exists right now. It is, though, a research-based system. And I did say I would talk a little bit about Esprit. So this is a company in Ottawa, and they have essentially started from scratch and have purchased sensors, have purchased a hub. They have a really interesting bed sensor, and they are doing in sort of more customizable way what Best Buy is doing in a well, I would call more a generic way. So this company will actually go to your home, insert the sensors where you want them, and will work on with you trying to measure the things that you want measured in the home. So they're a startup. They have done a number of installs in individual homes and retirement homes. I've partnered in research in a number of projects, so I have a good sense of what they're doing. And again, this is where my conflict of interest lies. I am associated with them, but just to talk about it. So this is the intelligent home of the future, where he says, "Another beer, please, Hal." And it says, "I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. The bathroom scale and the hall mirror are reporting disturbing flab anomalies." Right? So this is the next generation where information from sensors is used to make decisions. So the medication hasn't been taken, the medication box hasn't been opened. Now Google will say, "Hey, did you want to take your blood pressure pill now?" If it's not taken 10 minutes later, "Hey, you still haven't taken your blood pressure pill," and then maybe a third time, and then maybe contact a family member, right? So this is near, like we're getting close to this. So as regarding available technology, I don't know if that generated some questions.
So Jill kind of linked back to the caveat slide, and she was asking, has there been any discussions about how we will address privacy issues outside of research? Is there any sort of a legal framework that's emerging with these new technologies to prevent abuse or that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, the short answer is no. I mean, the long answer is that, you know, many research teams and certainly in AgeWell, there's an entire group of researchers, you know, working on this ethics / privacy, you know, domain. You know, the AI people are looking, how do we, you know, improve our databases? So there are groups looking at this. I mean, I think that, you know, what usually happens is government takes a few years to catch up, right? And so just like now, you know, the CRTC is starting to look at, what's all this stuff on the internet? Is it all good for you? Maybe, maybe not. And we might start looking at, you know, what we might limit, you know, as far as what's on the internet. So, you know, so those are huge public policy issues, right? And so, you know, what's freedom of speech? What, you know, so you get into all these debates. But what I'll say is that, you know, there are legal groups that are concerned about this. There are technology groups that are concerned about this. There are clinicians that are concerned about this. And there is a lot of data, there's a lot of papers being published in this domain. We published one 10 years ago where we talked about privacy and autonomy. So there's, you know, and it's ongoing. But the reality is we haven't figured it out, and it's because the technology is changing and then changing rapidly. So every time we think, oh, well, for, you know, so just to give an example, as a motion sensor in a living room, it will say motion, no motion, motion, no motion. It will say this every minute. That data will go in on, you know, through a pipe, will go into, you know, somewhere through a pipe that someone may break into. So someone hacks it and goes, oh, look, motion, no motion, motion, no motion. But they don't know, even with the serial number, they don't know where this motion detector is. They don't know where on earth it is, first of all, but they don't know in which room it is, even if they were to narrow it down to a particular block, right? They wouldn't be able to identify the room because you can move it. You can put it on this wall or this wall, right? So someone hacks that and goes, oh, look, motion, no motion, but what does it mean, right? So there's data, you can breach the data, but it's meaningless. It's not meaningless for those that know, you know, are monitoring it, it's not meaningless, but for anyone who tries to hack into it, it's pretty much meaningless. Of course, that's very different than video feed, right? So a video feed, you know, you can identify the people, right? So the researchers, what we do is we say, well, okay, so we don't want a video feed, but we want as much information as comes from a video camera. So for instance, for mobility, we have developed, not we, but there's a company that has developed, and we're testing it, stick figures. So they take the joints in your body that the camera identifies, and so you become a stick figure. So that stick figure is great for monitoring rate of walking and, you know, are you standing or are you lying on the ground? But it's not unidentifiable because it's a stick figure, right? You know, there'll be tens of thousands of other people that will have the same kind of stick figure as you do. So there's a public policy issue that's an open question. In the meantime, though, the researchers, the technology people are looking to decrease the data coming out and making it as anonymous as possible. So if that makes any sense, but yeah. It's a great question, and it's a work in progress.
There were a couple of kind of more practical questions. So somebody commented that power outages would obviously affect data transfer. So imagining that there would be
a big caveat right there, right? What do you do with a power failure, right? So The good news is if you have a power failure, you can have batteries that could, back up the system, but they won't last a week, right? So what do you do with power failures, and what do you do with battery failures? Because you can say, sure, let's put batteries everywhere, then we don't have to worry about the power going to the house, but yeah, still the internet goes down because there's no power going to the house. So yeah, there's a significant issue around data continuity. And there are sort of patch work around it, but obviously you can't account for every possible situation. So for instance, you can have a hub that has a backup battery that continues to collect data even in a power failure. And it might have, but it has a limited amount of storage space. So it might keep, data for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And then when the power comes back, it can then upload that data. Or it can be a smart little hub that only takes the important events and says, we're not going to store motion, no motion, no motion, no motion. We're just going to store motion, and we're just going to store it as blocks. So there was, so then you can reduce the data. So there are ways of managing it, but of course, if you have a flood and the computer breaks and your house breaks, I mean, obviously, it's no longer functional. So you can't prevent everything, but there are ways to reduce the loss related to power failures. So a day or two, there are ways around it. Obviously, if it's a critical infrastructure failure, then if everything else is failing, then that'll fail as well.
We're getting close to the end of our time, but there was an interesting question. I thought about this too, is how acceptable is this technology for people with dementia in terms of, could the lights or the noises trigger responsive behaviors or make people feel uncomfortable?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I mean, and it goes back to something someone had asked earlier, right? Which is sort of that whole consent piece. So consent is difficult enough with healthy people, as I already pointed out, right? We're consenting to all kinds of things every day without thinking about them. And, no one has, I don't think anyone's on this, on this video chat has been, has actually read their phone, agreement that they signed when they activated their phone. So consent is relative at the best of times. When it gets to people with cognitive impairment, it gets way more complicated because people with cognitive impairment, by definition, cannot consent, right? They have a cognitive problem, so they cannot weigh the pros and cons and cannot project into the future. If I do this, these good things are going to happen. If I do this, these bad things could happen. So they're not able to consent anyways. So then it becomes a question of a substitute decision maker. So we have in our research had it many times where the person, the substitute decision maker agreed for the devices to be installed in the home or under the bed or wherever of a person with cognitive impairment. All good, we install it. We wait for the person to leave the room because we don't want them to be nervous about, what's going on, what are you doing in my room? So, we wait till they leave, we put it all in, and then we run it, and then the person goes back but sometimes they find a sensor. They're looking for whatever, and they find the wire coming out from under their mattress. And then they follow that wire, and then it's plugged into the wall. So they unplug it. So now there's no data. And so the question is this assent, right? Because after consent, there is assent. Assent is if, as a child, if you don't, even though you can't decide if you want that appendix surgery or not, that's maybe too acute, but I mean, if on the way to the operating room you said, no, I don't want this, I'm too afraid, theoretically it stops because you have not given assent. Even though you can't give consent, you have to sort of agree that some intervention to me may happen now. So assent is a whole other question. So if a person with dementia is pulling things out of the wall, are they refusing assent or not, right? Or is it just a habit? So that's one thing. Back to the question of, is this disruptive in people's lives? In our study, we have not found it we have not found that it has scared people, that they've misunderstood it. If it's using the wife's voice is usually great. And some people have said, no, just use Siri. And even that seems to have been okay, because we never had to remove a system because it was creating more stress than good. So yeah, so I didn't answer it completely, the question, but it's an ongoing conversation. But yeah, consent, complicated; assent, complicated; getting the right method to communicate, complicated.
Thanks, Frank. And just so you know, we're almost at the end of our time. So I know your final few slides are more kind of just wrapping up. So yeah. I'll leave you to
fast. All right. So we talked about this older lady living in Orleans. We have this image of, she's transitioning over here somewhere. So we know that communication can be used at any age. Lighting can be used at any age. With mild cognitive impairment, a calendar aid, memory aids, be they through a phone, be they through Alexa, can be used today. We can do computer games, computer use that can be monitored today, which would all provide useful information for her. And we can monitor activities of daily living. We're on the edge. It's not super refined, but it's there. We can certainly identify if there's been no humidity in the bathroom for a week. So I hope that you have been able to see some of the potential roles of CogTech. I hope you've been able to see that you can buy things off the shelf with all the caveats that we said. And I hope I've made clear that the smart monitoring home is the precursor to the supportive smart home, the one we're working on now. And I think we'll just skip this. And this is just creativity, using technology, an airplane, to create shade. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Frank. Carl?
Yeah, it looks like we're out of time already. I just want to thank you so much, Frank, for your wonderful session and for sharing all your knowledge with us. It was really fascinating, the topic, and hearing all of these new innovations happening. Also really wonderful to hear everyone's questions. It was awesome. It felt like a conversation.